everyone. Welcome to History of the Negro Baseball League and Hinchliffe Stadium. I'm so happy to turn this over to someone who knows what they're talking about. So I want to introduce Bruce Lowry, who is the one who told me about the story. Bruce?
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming in, and especially Brian LoPinto, who without Brian LoPinto and Larry Doby Jr., our two guests tonight, this revival of Hinchliffe Stadium would not be happening. And I think that's an understatement, honestly. I was formerly wrote for the Record and the Herald News, and I covered Hinchliffe. I wrote several articles about it, and I just sort of fell in love with the story and the stories that I heard about it from different people. Every time I'd ask somebody, well, where did they do that? Oh, it was at Hinchliffe Stadium. Oh, where'd they do that? Oh, it was at Hinchliffe Stadium. They played the Thanksgiving game there every year. And then I began to, delve more into the history of the Negro Leagues. And so anyway, without further ado, I'll let Brian give Larry Doby Jr. a better introduction than I did, and then I'll let you guys take it away.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate that. I mean, that was a very kind introduction. And a thank you, to the Union Public Library for this opportunity. And it's always great to be a part of something like this, especially with Larry Doby Jr. And of course, Larry's father played for the Cleveland Indians, was the first African-American to play in the American League, of course, played in the Negro Leagues with the Newark Eagles, and was born and raised in Camden, South Carolina. And as a young child, moved to Paterson, New Jersey. And it was in Paterson where he made his home. And it was a place where he really never forgot Paterson, no matter where he went. And he was a four-sport star at Eastside High School. And right after graduation in 1942, he was invited to try out for the Newark Eagles at Hinchliffe Stadium. And he is one of two future Hall of Famers that tried out at Hinchliffe Stadium, because in 1937, Monty Irvin also tried out at Hinchliffe Stadium. So you have two future Hall of Famers that tried out for the Newark Eagles at Hinchliffe Stadium. And I don't know too many other places in the world where you can do that. So, and to me, that day for Larry Doby in 1942, in essence, changed his life forever. He played the rest of the summer with the Newark Eagles under the name of Larry Walker. So he was the first Larry Walker in the Hall of Fame. We have a new one that's going to be coming in soon. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've always wondered if for whatever reason, if Larry's father maybe had a cold that day, didn't feel well, didn't make the club, do the Newark Eagles win the 1946 World Series? Do the Cleveland Indians win the 1948 World Series? And I think really that speaks to me to like greatest moment in Hinchliffe Stadium history. It wasn't something that was a game. It was something that really changed the trajectory of history. And I hope that with the rehabilitation of Hinchliffe Stadium, that going forward, I hope that we as a society can say Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby, whether you want to say integrated baseball, broke the color barrier, we have to say that, because with any great moment in history, it can't just be one person. And no one will ever take anything away from Jackie Robinson. Let's say that there's also other people, and Larry Doby, your father, Larry, was a big part of that.
Thank you, Brian. First of all, I'm happy to lend my time or my name to anything that has to do with Hinchliffe. I wish I could say that I was one of the reasons why the renovation is going to happen, but there was a whole lot of people that had a lot to do with it, a lot more than I was. I'm just a person who lent his time and his name to anything that they decided to. So I thank Brian, I thank the mayor, I thank the people who really did the legwork, who first of all wouldn't let that field die, and then second of all, once it became a landmark by the government wouldn't let the idea of bringing it back die. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm thankful to those people, Brian included, for, you know, making this stuff happen.
I appreciate that, and I'll say that, you know, really, you know, having, you know, you've always been so supportive of the project. You know, I mean, attending events like this, and you know, we saw each other back in December. You know, when there was an announcement there. These are important things, I think, for you to be a part of. I
Yeah.
like being a part of them as well, and really, it's just kind of continuing to kind of beat the drum that this place matters, and
Yeah.
we're glad that the you know, years back, the National Trust for Historic Preservation really stepped in and did a lot of work to help really kind of mold this thing together. They were able to bring in $300,000 through American Express. And the Friends of Hinchliffe Stadium, we put in a $500,000 matching grant through the New Jersey Historic Trust. That's seed money to get us to where we're going today. And I think, luckily and hopefully, early April, we're actually going to start to see some construction at Hinchliffe Stadium. So
Right. Groundbreaking.
it's taken a very long time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they're hoping to do that just before opening day, which is very symbolic. But of course, in our area, we can't even do construction because there's still snow. And
Yeah.
I think we're going to have some coming forward too. So,
Right.
Hey, Brian, can you elaborate a little bit more? I mean, I know Hinchliffe. I like to say Hinchliffe. I'm sorry, but actually, the mayor who used to be on the school board when I first met him, he called it. He used to say Hinchliffe, and I would say I think it's spelled Hinchliffe, and then he started using that. He'll deny that, I'm sure, but I think it's just a logical, because you look at it the way it's spelled, it just that's the thing, and I think it's one of the oddities that and charms of the place that make it special. Can you speak? I would like to know personally. You talked about the Cleveland Indians in '48. Satchel Paige was on that team, and they both were, you know, great stars of the Negro League. So I wonder if you might elaborate more on just how important Hinchliffe was in the Negro League games. Was there a singular game that was? And I think, Brian, you told me a story once about the New York Black Yankees played a big game there or something. I just wonder if either of you could elaborate on some of that a little bit.
I mean, they played a few big games. I think the one that comes to mind for me is in 1935, and I'm actually someone who I've always been really fascinated with no-hitters. It's such a great phenomenon. I should have attended too, quite frankly, but that's another story for another time. But in 1935, a great pitcher by the name of Elmer McDuffie pitched no-hitter at Hinchliffe Stadium, and that was a game called the House of David. And if anybody knows that, David, interesting traveling team that they all wore very long beards, and they were out of Benton Harbor, Michigan. And Elmer McDuffie pitched a no-hitter, and quite frankly, I think his numbers probably could have warranted being into the Hall of Fame. But I think, you know, when you think about a no-hitter, it really takes a lot and a lot of team effort to, you know, it's one mishap and you lose the whole thing. And to think that actually happened at Hinchliffe Stadium, that's I think one of the special games that come to mind.
Brian,
made national news.
I may have jumped the gun a bit. There may be people in attendance who don't really know
Yeah, I
the
do see
story
that
of
the
the
waiting
Negro
room.
Leagues in general and why they were important and why they still hold a place of importance to us, so we don't forget what happened. So can you just elaborate a little bit of why there was even a need for Negro Leagues in the first place?
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, this concept of a gentleman's agreement in baseball, this idea that there was no true rule against African Americans being in Major League Baseball, but apparently there was. And you know, I actually read a very interesting op-ed piece back from the 30s. There was a columnist named Henry Brown, Broun, and he had written this interesting piece that I found recently that said, well, African Americans can, I guess it was the 40s, they can compete in the Olympics and fight our wars, but they can't play a game between the Chicago White Sox and the St. Louis Browns. And it was very befuddling to him. And I found that to be very interesting. But, you know, actually, I actually want to bring Larry Doby Jr. in on this one, because Larry, I recently on MLB Network, you made a great connection about American ingenuity. Can you tell us what you had said? Because you
Well,
said it a few times and it was
yeah,
amazing. I
it's
really thought it was
just,
perfectly
to
said.
me, first of all, the gentleman's agreement that you speak of was definitely an agreement. It wasn't written, but it was an agreement.
Right.
And, people had tried to break it, and they were, foiled at every angle. In fact, Mr. Vec, the gentleman who signed my father, had a plan to buy the Phillies, I believe it was, I think it was the Phillies, and then he was going to stock them with Philadelphia Stars and all Negro League players. And they got wind of his idea before he purchased the team, and they struck down the sale. So it was a very real thing. And obviously with World War II, the fact that you could be a normal American and fight and die for your country, and then you could come back to the same country that you defended and couldn't play the national pastime was, to say the least, perplexing to many people. And, my comment has always been that the Negro Leagues, to me, were about as American as you could be, because it was one of the most living examples of American ingenuity, meaning that necessity is the mother of invention. That guy, those brothers that were in Ohio that looked at that bird and thought one day, we want to fly like that, and then eventually the Wright brothers went to Kitty Hawk and had, the first flight, is kind of the same thing with Rube Foster and all those other guys that started the Negro Leagues. They knew that the guys were good enough to play, but they knew that they didn't have a venue. And American ingenuity being what it is for everybody, whatever color, they decided to start their own league. And it was a fantastic league with many stars that unfortunately will never be household names to most people because of lack of TV, lack of radio, lack of any kind of coverage. So that's probably, one of the most proud moments I have in my life of being an African American, is that they said, okay, not only they wouldn't let them play with their ball, but they took their ball home. So they said, okay, we'll get our own ball. And they played. And there were fantastic players in that league, which really is sad that all of America didn't get to see him play. And I guess something that was always interesting to me was that, like my father was the first Black in the American League. Jackie Robinson was the first Black, period. And, they were picked for a myriad of reasons, being young, being educated, playing on integrated teams, all these things that when they delved into their backgrounds, they thought were necessities in order to be successful. But my father easily said many times that neither him nor Jackie Robinson were the best player in the league. So that's got to be frustrating when you're the best and you don't get your chance. And Josh Gibson, my father said, hands down was the best player. And he didn't get a chance. Age and other things were against him. So it's sad in one way that, everybody couldn't be brought into that fold. It's sad in another way that once baseball became integrated, it was the death of a hugely successful African-American business. They say what killed it? Integration, progress. But it's cool that guys actually played on Hinchliffe. They played there and it still stands. And the other place is Rickman Field in Birmingham, Alabama, which still stands. Those are the only two places. So that's the importance of it. And it's awesome that enough people have seen fit that it's going to be restored and it's going to, host some more games. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, Brian, did you have a specific presentation you wanted to make, or I thought we could open it up to questions if you don't?
I thought we were just going to have maybe like a conversation like this,
Okay.
like a Q&A. I don't have anything specific.
Okay.
But,
I did want to
certainly
mention.
glad to chime in. And
Yeah, my son actually played high school baseball in in Alabama, and he got to actually play at
Rickman Field.
Rickwood Field, and they've that field was maintained, I think, for years and years. It never really got, I don't think, into the the shape that Hinchliffe is in now. But it takes a community, I think, and Brian and I have talked about this. It takes a community to care about a place like that, and to hold it up and get it going again. And I think that we're on the right track. So I guess I'll open it up, and then can you open it? And then I'll have one question I've been dying to ask Larry, and then I'll open it up for everybody. Okay. So I want to know what, if any, relationship Larry had with your father had with Jackie Robinson, and how did it? Was there any? I know there was people. It's all back and forth now, and it's a favorite Brian LoPinto story. But was there any tension between them, or were they friends? I know they're from different parts of the country and different backgrounds, but did they? I just would be curious to what their relationship was, if there was one.
Well, obviously there was a relationship, and as far as I know, there was never any tension, because they were the only people who knew how the other one felt. So there was a lot of conversation about how to deal with certain situations, who the good guys were, who the bad guys were. And back in that day, they were allowed to barnstorm. So Jackie Robinson had a team, with my father and Campanella and some others that played against Bob Feller's All-Stars. And from what I understand, they drew record crowds and made a whole bunch of money. And the commissioner put a kibosh on that probably midway through my father's career. And I think they were a little sad, because they got to spend time with friends that they don't normally see during the season, and they got to put a little extra money in their pocket. And, my father had the utmost respect for Jackie Robinson. He always referred to him as Mr. Robinson. And he knew that he was on a little island in the South Pacific in '46 when the news came out that Mr. Rickey was going to sign Jackie. And immediately, they were overjoyed. Not only that somebody was going to finally get a chance, but also that it would open up the possibility of others getting chances too. So I think their relationship was a little where they empathized with each other about what they were going through, and probably talked about the guys that weren't so nice and so forth and so on, but again, my father had nothing but the utmost respect for him. He said he deserved everything he got. He was number one, and my father was very proud to be number two.
I imagine you mentioned the barnstorming. I imagine in those games there were also got to be African American spectators, which were, not only were the major leagues segregated, and Brian can speak to this better than me, but all the pictures I've ever seen of a Major League Baseball game when DiMaggio and them played, I don't see many black faces stand. So it might have been, they didn't get to go see games there either. So
yeah,
we're going to open it up now for everyone.
So Mark C is up first. Mark C. Womack.
Hi, this is Mark C's mommy. How are you? My son is 10 years old, and he plays Little League. He
awesome.
Plays baseball on rec and travel, and he's gonna join a club team soon. He loves the game. When we go on travel, our team is very diverse. I think we have a group of 13 kids that are everything. You can name it, where we have one on the team.
Nice.
But when we go to play to the different towns, I've noticed that we're probably the only team that has any African-American children or children of color. So I guess my question to you is, why do you think that is? Where did it get lost? Because I feel like maybe if there was a Negro baseball league that still existed, perhaps that might have kind of changed the paradigm. I'm not sure why there aren't as many Black kids playing baseball as there are playing basketball. And then my other question is, are there any places where I could find films or videos where I can see some of the old games from the Negro Baseball League that I could show my son.
Brian, can you speak about maybe a place where they could do some research and see some stuff?
Yeah, I would definitely, I think you're going to see mainly film clips, not so much full games. So I think a lot of what you're going to find would be just, like your newsreel type stuff, which, you're going to see some great footage there. But I'm not aware of any full games that exist in its entirety.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I would obviously start with your obvious with YouTube and things of that nature. Major League Baseball's website might have something. The Negro League's Baseball Museum, the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Try those websites, do your own search. There might be some documentaries out there that exist, but I think where you're going to find a lot of will be clips. Maybe it's going to be them before the game, just like tight shots of them by the dugout. You might have occasional, hits, but you may not know if the ball was caught or not. So, but there is footage out there. And I wish there was some from Hinchliffe Stadium, but I haven't found any yet. But wouldn't that be nice to see? But
I mean, I'd just like to add, I have never seen any, real full games of my dad playing in the Negro Leagues. I'd love to see them, but I don't think they exist. I have seen, as Brian said, clips, of like swinging the bat and running and stuff like that, but it's far and few between. And it is actually, a shame that people don't know about them, especially little boys like your son who would love to know about them. And I guess the last thing I would say, young lady, is the reason that there is not more African-American participation in Major League Baseball is the $1 million question. They have been trying their butts off to involve, African-Americans with the RBI, which is Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities, the baseball academies and so forth and so on. And it's falling short. I'm not going to blame them because I think they're doing, what they can do, but nobody has found out the key. The other thing I would say to you is that when you're a little kid and you look at TV, you identify with what you see. And if you look at football or if you look at basketball, you can see, overwhelming numbers of African Americans playing. And so that's where they probably gravitate towards because they see people that look like them. When they watch baseball, they look like them, but their names aren't like them. Most of them are Latinos and they don't sound like them when they talk, and that's just a little snippet. The other thing is that this world that we live in today is so quick. Everybody wants something right now. They want it yesterday. And you can watch a kid playing football in college one day, and then the next year he's playing in the pros. So the kids can make that connection, whereas, okay, I can go to college for a little bit and then boom, I can play in the pros. Or they can watch the kid playing basketball and then the next thing he's on TV and everything. And then the next thing he's in the pros. College baseball is hardly ever on TV. And you might see some phenom who is so good and then 3 or 4 years later until he makes the major leagues. So it's not an immediate thing. Nobody goes from high school to the pros in baseball anymore. They don't do it in basketball or football either, but they do it in 1 or 2 years. So I think that's also a contributing factor to why there's, less participation in Major League Baseball.
Thank you very much for that question. I just want to say that one of the ways, this is the biggest crowd we've had. We've had lots of meetings where there's 100 people signed up, but this is the biggest crowd we've had. And one of the reasons is because there were so many Facebook groups on the Negro Baseball League. So I think that's another way to approach it. So here's the order. Larry is up next, then Linda, then Johnny, then Peggy. Larry, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Doby, we've read books, seen movies about the experience of Jackie Robinson in the Brooklyn Dodger dugout in the locker room and when he was on the field. But there's very little that's been told about what your dad went through. And I wonder if you could talk to us about what it was like for him in the Cleveland Indians locker room and when he went on the field.
Well, very similar, Larry, to what Mr. Robinson went through. my father went to high school in Paterson, New Jersey, and Eastside High, and played on integrated teams all throughout on every sport. So that was normal to him. So the first day that he goes from Newark on the train to Chicago, Lou Boudreau brings him into the locker room to introduce him to his teammates, and several of the teammates would not shake his hand. So that was unbelievable to him. Like, I think he was more shocked than he was hurt, because he couldn't believe somebody wouldn't do that. So he gets over that. So they have a second baseman, which was Joe Gordon at the time, a Hall of Famer who was an MVP for the Yankees. So that was the position my father played in the Negro League. So he wasn't going to play that. So he's going to play first base. He didn't have a first baseman's glove. It's a particular glove, as you know.
Right.
So they asked one of the guys on the, could he borrow his glove? And the guy said no. So they had to send the traveling secretary, to the White Sox to get a first baseman's glove for him to play. Again, he was okay with that. So then they go out on the field for the first time, and everybody's warming up, and nobody would play catch with him. And that's when he said it hit him that this is not something he's ever really experienced before. So he stood there for about 10 minutes. He said he felt like it was an hour. And then Joe Gordon said, hey, kid, let's warm up. And they warmed up every game after that, the rest of the year and through the next year. And he was one of the ones that made that transition for my father a lot smoother. And growing up in my house, my father, the guys who weren't good guys' names were never mentioned. The only names that were mentioned were the good guys. And Joe Gordon was one, Jim Hegan, Bob Lemon. You know, those were the names that he talked about that didn't care what color his skin were. They wanted to see if he could play, if he could, he was good.
Larry, are you there?
Yep.
Are you finished? I'm sorry. It sounds like we cut you off. You're okay?
I'm fine. I hope he heard everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard everything until the end.
Okay.
But what were the fans like? How was he
I'll tell
treated
you-
by the fans?
In Cleveland, he was treated great. When I was a little kid, all I wanted to do was hear the stories about my father's playing days. He didn't talk about them. And so when he did say something, my ears perked up. So one time we were talking about something, and he said he never got booed in Cleveland. And as much as I found it hard to believe, because they booed Mickey Mantle in Yankee Stadium. But when he told me that, I had to believe him, because you got to understand, there's a guy that, you know, I knew my whole life that never talked about that stuff. And when he said that, it meant so much to me, because it meant that he belonged to them. He was their guy. And whether he struck out 3 times or hit a home run, they were going to cheer for him. So he has magical memories of Cleveland as he does of Paterson, New Jersey. And that's why whenever either one of those places ask me to do something, I do my damnedest to do it.
Thank you very much to both of the Larrys. Okay, now we're up with Linda. Barth.
How did the stadium get its name?
Yeah,
Come on,
Hinchliffe
Brian.
Stadium. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Essentially, the mayor at the time was John V. Hinchliffe. Now, Hinchliffe Stadium was not always Hinchliffe Stadium. It started out as City Stadium, and so that was 1932. By 1934, it became Hinchliffe Stadium. And when he was asked about that, his claim was that, well, it's not for me, it's for my uncle, John, who also was a mayor in Paterson. So John V. Hinchliffe, his uncle was John Hinchliffe. During the big great fire, there was like a year and a half, like 1903, 1902, where for a year and a half, there were 2 floods, a fire, and a tornado, and it was under his uncle's watch. He claimed that it's named for him, but the belief it's named for the Hinchliffe family, probably for both mayors, plus the Hinchliffe family. They were big brewers in town. So the Hinchliffe Brewery, which is actually still standing, by the way, they're a part of a big brewery magnate. And God, I'd love to see a brewery right behind Hinchliffe someday. So make that a destination. But But yeah, that's how the name came to be. Hinchliffe.
Donnie, you're up.
I have two questions. The first question is, what was the gentleman's agreement? Right. And the second question is, how many of the Negro League players are in Cooperstown?
Larry, do you want to take the question about?
Well,
the
I
gentleman's-
don't know what the numbers are for the Negro League players. So I can't answer that. I know that there's many and that there probably will be more. Now, the gentleman's agreement was just that there would be no black players in Major League Baseball. That's what it was.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
HP, do you?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
it's essentially it was this thing. I mean, they call it the gentleman's agreement, but not gentlemanly by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And some of the things I read, that a lot of people thought that it was the commissioner, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, that was the real big problem. They thought that when he died, it would open up the doors
Yeah.
for African Americans. Turned out not to
Yep.
be the case right away.
I
And a
just
lot of
want
that
to
was
throw in
really,
real quickly, Brian, that there, as far as the Hall of Fame, I went up there a couple of years ago, and there are several Negro League players inducted. I don't know how many exactly. I would guess maybe 24, less than 24 or something.
it's about
But
35, I think.
Sorry?
About
Yeah, what
35 or
all I
so.
wanted to mention was that the Hall of Fame, several years ago, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, they started voting in Negro League players as a special category or something. Isn't that
Mhm.
right, Brian?
Yeah. Yeah. So 2006, and I was at that induction ceremony. They inducted a number of folks from the Negro Leagues. One of them being Effa Manley, the only woman thus far who's enshrined in baseball's Hall of Fame. Alex
Yep.
Pompez, who was owner of the New York Cubans, and the Cubans played at Hinchlaf Stadium, 1935, 1936. I'm not certain that they got it right necessarily, because I think Buck O'Neil was a big major oversight. I think a lot of people feel that way. I think there were a couple other people that we discussed. Some people feel that John Beckwith is a ball player that should have been considered for the Hall of Fame. I would even argue, as I mentioned earlier, Terrace Elmer McDuffie, I think could have been a candidate for that. But it's always difficult, and that's part of the beauty of baseball, is that you can make those arguments for or against players that could or should be in a Hall of Fame, or who's the greatest of all time, etc. But I do think at the very least with Buck O'Neil, they missed the mark on that one.
HP, did you have a question, an answer to this question?
Yeah, I do. This is Larry Hogan. Brian, I love to see you back again. I haven't seen you in quite a while. Larry Doby, you're just, wonderful to be with you too. Several things. I was a part of the group back in 2006 that put in 17 Negro Leaguers at that point in time. I think there were probably 11 or 12 already put in across the years there, from Satchel being the first all the way back in 1972, I think. So there's probably 29 maybe, or 28 right now in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
A couple of other things. We did a documentary shot in 1987 and 1988. It's up on the net, so anybody can get to it. And we had 5 Negro Leaguers with us: Max Manning, Pine Israel, Leon Day, but I'm forgetting the other, Bill Cash, and one other. I forget who it is right now. Anyway, it's a beautiful sequence. We sat them down in Hinchliffe Stadium. These fellas had played in Hinchliffe Stadium, and they recollected what it was like to play. And at that time, Hinchliffe was in wonderful shape because it was a field for school kids.
Yep.
And again, I say that documentary is available up on the net if you want to look at it.
What's the name of it, Larry?
Before You Can Say Jackie Robinson, Black Baseball in America in the Era of the Color Line. And in it, we get out of the way and let the players talk about their experiences. So it was just a wonderful experience for those of us who made it. If anybody really wants to get into Larry in terms of how sports writers have covered him across the years, Jerry Eisenberg is the person that you need to start to read, the great sports writer from the Star Ledger. And I don't know if you can pull stuff up from from Jerry, but if you can, those are the columns that you really need to read. Jerry was very close to Larry, admired him greatly, and had good experiences with him. Jerry talks about the two of them walking through the Hall of Fame just before Larry's induction, and what a special, special moment that was for Jerry. One other thing. We have in that documentary a very little clip of Larry talking about what his experiences were in the Negro Leagues. And he used, and this for Larry Jr., but for Brian too, he used the word comfortability. It was more comfortable in the Negro Leagues than it was when he came up into the majors. He was a young guy when he was in the Negro Leagues, and I think really enjoying himself playing baseball. So, Larry, Brian, want to comment on that?
Well, I just wanted to ask you to just tell us who you are and how to get this film.
Larry Hogan, and it is up on the net. I'm trying to think of what the link is. I don't have the link written down. No, but I think if you put up before you can say Jackie Robinson, it'll come up for you on YouTube.
I'm going to send a follow-up email to everybody, and between Larry and I, all the Larrys and I, and we will try to come up with a name. So Larry, Doby and Brian, did you have something else you wanted to say about this? Or should we go on to Peggy?
No, I think Mr. Hogan expressed it pretty well. So
great.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Peggy, you're up finally.
Hi, this is Perry, actually, Perry Barber. It's fine. Perry, I used to say like Gaylord Perry. Now people are starting to forget who he is. And so I say Tyler Perry, and sometimes they get it. So anyway, Larry, I just wanted to tell you that everything I've ever read or heard about your father leads me to believe that he deserves every bit as much of respect and admiration for what he did, because he may have been the second Black ball player in the major leagues, but he was the first in the American League. And he was all by himself for a year before Satchel joined the Cleveland Indians. Oh, by the way, he didn't play for the Cleveland Indians. He played for the Cleveland Indians. If we say Hinchliffe, we got to say Cleveland. So, and Brian, I got to tell you, I remember meeting you at the Yogi Berra Museum, got to be 15 years ago. And this whole time, I thought it was Hinchliffe until I saw you last night at the Saber chapter meeting, for which you just won a very prestigious award. So congratulations about that.
Thank you. For that.
Now, mentioning Satchel Paige, Larry, I was wondering if you have any favorite stories about him that you want to tell us?
I don't have any stories. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to meet him, Perry, but I'll just tell you what my father, kind of related to me. First of all, he was bigger than the league. That's what a star he was. He was bigger than the Negro League. That's how good he was. That's how popular he was. And, it's crazy when you think about it, but he had his own plane at one point, back, I mean, think of that. It's crazy. And he, my father said it wasn't unusual for him to pitch 3 games in 3 different cities in one day, and get paid 3 times.
Why not?
But he was, he was the best that they had seen ever for some of them. And I guess my father teased a little bit, because obviously when he came to the Indians later on in 48 with my father, they were roommates. And, somebody asked my father, how was it rooming with Satchel? And he said, I roomed with his bag. Because he wasn't there.
Now, may I ask you a quick question? Because he was the only Black ball player until Satchel arrived, did he have a roommate before Satchel? Did he room with one of?
No.
Okay,
he would be in a hotel. Yeah, he'll be in a hotel by himself.
In a separate hotel. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh. Glad
But he
things have
said that
changed.
when he came up in 48, you know, he was 40 something years old and he was getting them out with just the fastball. Put a little on, take a little off, put a little on, take a little off, and was still getting them out. And they didn't get to see Satchel anywhere near his peak. And he was still a winning, effective pitcher, you know, in 48.
Well, he had that great sort of rubbery, almost sidearm motion that I think saved his arm a lot of wear and tear.
Probably.
Yeah. Thank you both, and thank you, Union Library, for doing this. It's been great.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, Gary Smith is up.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Hey, thank you very much, Larry, for devoting the time to this. This is a special time to get to hear from somebody closely related to the Negro League and baseball. I don't have so much a question as I do a comment or even a confession as an old white guy from the South that just grew up completely devoted, loving baseball. I'm an analytics guy. I love detail, I love the stats, everything about baseball. And that's what led me into starting to read about the Negro Leagues just because I wanted to understand the history. And this was years ago, so I started reading different books, and boy, it opened my eyes to American history. And it opened my eyes to the history that was never taught to me. Reading about the Negro Leagues. And I would encourage any kid, somebody was asking about how to get kids into baseball, get them reading about true American history.
Is it okay if I
Gary, we lost your sound.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry. Yeah, when Jackie Robinson signed that contract, it's amazing how much racism continued on beyond that time. And it's a shame as a white American that took place and that we weren't taught really what was going on. And I've become friends a little bit with Phil Dixon. I told him the other day, I don't know how you wrote this Dizzy Dean barnstorming book without slamming your fists against the wall. I don't know how you could do it. It's just, and I thank you guys for what you're doing to keep this truth out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What part of the South are you from, Gary?
Nashville, Tennessee. Grew up in North.
I heard you guys got a little ice down there.
We got too much. Yeah, we don't handle it well. So yeah, we're stuck here. But this is a good diversion. So thank you for doing it.
Right, Larry, I would like to ask you a question about. There was a lot of talk about Satchel Paige earlier. I also know Monty Irvin played for the Indians, and I know, as Brian said earlier, he also did a tryout at Hinchliffe. What was their relation? Did he talk more about him or any about him?
Oh yeah, they were good friends from the Negro League days. So yeah, and continued on. They were lifelong friends. You know, Mr. Irvin was one of the guys that was in my house when I was little, so I knew all about him.
What year did he come into the league, Brian?
It would be, I believe it was 1949, and then
49
July of that year, and then 1950 his first full season.
Yeah, and 51, I think he led the league in RBIs.
I think you're correct in that. And another interesting note, of course, Monty and your father faced each other in the 1954 World Series.
Yes, unfortunately,
your father was on second base when Willie Mays made the catch.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so Mr. Irvin, like I said, they were lifelong friends, and you know, utmost respect for each other's families. The same thing. A few years ago, there was a ceremony in Essex County where they both. Well, my father lived there. Mr. Irvin went to Orange High School and was a 3-sport star there also. They were, Mr. Irvin, Mr. Berra, and my father all were honored at the same time. And in my acceptance speech, I thought it was quite fitting because you had the one guy who taught him how to be a pro, which was Mr. Irvin when he came as a kid to the Eagles. And then you had the other guy who accepted him right away when he was in the big leagues, which was Mr. Berra. So it was fitting, and they were all friends, you know, throughout their lives. It was fitting that the three of them got the honor from the Essex County at the courthouse at the same time. I really thought that was, you know, apropos.
Tony, you're up.
Thank you. I was wondering if either Larry or Brian could talk a little bit about what the plans are for Hinchliffe Stadium. Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to play there? What's the rest of the development package that's making it work economically? What's going on now? Where are we in the development?
Well, there was some good news recently that the New Jersey EDA did approve tax credits for Hinchliffe Stadium. So the hope is that at some point this April, that the early stages of construction will begin. So that's really, that's the longest this thing has, we've waited a very long time for this very important day. So there was some first phase work that was done, and we were able to bring in some money through a matching grant with the New Jersey Historic Trust, but this is really the bulk of the project. So this will be tax credits. It just happened to be Paterson's turn for tax credits, and we're certainly grateful for that. So the developers, they're doing a great job. The city council did chime in. They wanted to make sure that there was some senior housing associated with this. So there will be senior housing behind Hinchliffe Stadium. Kind of a unique business model. All the stadiums I've seen, it's usually market rate or something where you have maybe college kids being a part of, but that was the ask from the city council, and they agreed upon that, and it's a fair trade in many ways. So it's taken a very long time, but you put this project under the category of better late than never.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Did you say there are going to be high school games there, Brian, or no?
Yes, so they will be able to play football there, soccer. They're going to have 2 baseball fields, which to me doesn't make sense. You should really just bring it back to the old Negro Leagues configuration, which is very similar to that of the old Polo Grounds. In 1963, they reconfigured the field where it put it in the corner of the horseshoe, which gave, I guess it would be left field about 500 feet and right field about 200. Find me another baseball stadium that looks like that. I don't think that's not really conducive to competitive play. So the plan as of right now, from what I'm told, is that it will be 2 baseball fields, one with the 1963 configuration and one with the appropriate Negro League configuration. And I would venture to guess most would want to play on where Larry's father played, as opposed to anyone from 1963 on. There's going to be a track, but my understanding is that track is not even for regulation high school use. So I'm not certain why they're doing that. Doesn't really make sense. Should probably put the track in a place where the high school students can compete on it, but we'll see. I mean, the last thing.
I remember that day a couple of years ago, Brian, when we were out there walking around and you said, this is where home plate is right here. They're supposed to be right here. You got very animated about it. But I agree with you. I mean, if we're going to revitalize this place, honor its true, the reason it's famous, the reason we're doing this, should be doing it anyway, to what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. It seems to me they should pay homage to as best they can, with financial constraints being what they are, to the game that was there, the place that was there. I know you have strong feelings about it, and I don't want to cause a big uproar or anything like that.
I mean, to me, it's not even an uproar. I think it's just it falls in the category of logic. I mean, I invite anybody to look up there's an aerial of Hinchliffe Stadium pre-1940 that shows the Negro Leagues diamond, and then look at the aerial of it today, where the baseball configuration was in 1963. You don't have to be a baseball player to understand that's not conducive for baseball. So it's not the biggest thing. Yes, you should be honoring the great players like Larry's father and the great men of the Negro Leagues. But there's also the competitive balance that really makes more sense, where you have something more like the Polo Grounds as opposed to the 1963 configuration with a 500-foot left field and a 200-foot right field. These high school students really use these games to propel them into the collegiate level. And to have something that's not as equitable, I don't think it's right for them.
HP, did you have a comment? HP,
Larry.
Yeah.
Larry?
Someone asked earlier about a Satchel story, and then the gentleman mentioned Dizzy Dean. This is very brief, and I think Well, here, listen to it. Dizzy Dean says if Satchel and me pitched on the same team, we would win 60. Satchel says, that Dizzy is too modest. Dean once said that Page was the best pitcher he ever saw, and I've been looking in the mirror for a long time.
HP, could you just tell us what your
Really,
background
really.
is, why you know so much?
Why I know so much?
Yeah,
I fell in love with the Negro Leaguers back in 1983. There were 150, I suppose, and I met and did programs with probably 25 or 30 of them. And once you meet the players, you're just hooked. The wonderful stories that they tell, the memories that they have, the camaraderie that was there amongst them. That's certainly the reference earlier that I made to Larry, this young man coming into play with these veterans and just connecting the two of them. So that's kind of, why I got involved to the degree that I have got involved. And
thank you.
I would have a question for both of the Larrys. They may know this, or Brian may know it too, but I'm interested to know if there are any stories about Mr. Veck, because you hear Branch Rickey all the time. He's kind of held in the same, a certain esteem because he was, but I know Veck was a very colorful guy.
oh yeah,
And he did a lot of weird things outside the box. But I mean, he definitely, as Larry said earlier, he definitely was a guy that cared about these players. And I just wonder if Larry has an origin story, how they got to, how that he decided, they got together basically, and what kind of relationship they had.
Mr. Hogan, you want to give him your take?
well, Veck was his father and inherited from his father. I think he was a very good guy, such a funny and interesting guy. And you mentioned he did lots of things that nobody else did. Well, he recognized talent. He knew Larry Doby was a good player. He knew, the people who followed Larry into the majors that he played with. And it was a long relationship between Veck and Larry Doby. It wasn't just entering into, but it went on across the years. Veck as in Wreck. That's the title of the book.
That's the book.
That's the book that Veck wrote himself. And I read it probably 35 or 40 years ago. And I think it's one of the top baseball books that has ever been written. So if you want to know about Bill Veck, go to his Veck and his Wreck. Veck
Go to
as
the-
in Wreck.
Go to the library and we'll get the book for you.
I also have one question for Brian. We've talked about baseball. We've talked about baseball a lot, but there is another part of Hinchliffe that was, they played high school football. That's well chronicled. But
yes, they did.
Duke Ellington also played some of his later concerts there. I wonder if you know anything about that, or how that happened, or what it was like, or anything like that.
Yeah, it was one of the last concerts of his life. I mean, Duke Ellington performed pretty much right till his death. I think he died in 1974, and this particular concert at Hinchliffe Stadium was in 1971. It was part of the Great Falls Festival, and it was a great from what I've read, it was a great concert. Duke Ellington, Tito Puente was on that bill, as well as Vaughn Monroe.
Wow.
So you have some really big heavy hitters
Yeah,
that performed at Hinchliffe Stadium. So yeah, I mean, Hinchliffe Stadium was built for football, but baseball marked the time. But certainly entertainment events such as what I just mentioned, believe it or not, Sly and the Family Stone performed there.
Wow.
Ike and Tina Turner. I mean, who cares about Ike, but Tina Turner performed there. So you have some really great things there. Auto racing with the midget cars and motorcycle races, boxing. I mean, boxing was rather big, so big that Babe Ruth used to go and attend boxing matches there. Joe Louis was a guest referee. Abbott and Costello, of course, Lou Costello being from Paterson, would perform just before some boxing matches. So, and of course there was football of course, the great rivalry between Larry's father's East Side High School and Central, and then later becoming Kennedy High School. And there was the Paterson Panthers who played professional football there from 1934 to 1950, except for the Warriors. And there were a couple other Paterson professional teams as well. So it has a rich history, but I always say it's baseball that marked the time, and without the African American history component through the Negro Leagues, I don't think this stadium is a National Historic Landmark. It's not within the boundaries of a national park, and I don't think they get tax credits for it.
So Larry Doby, did you have something to add?
Well, Brian's going to get bored, but when I was a little kid and I would ask my father, to tell me about baseball, all he would talk about was high school football, Thanksgiving Day against Central High School with 10,000 people, the whole city in the stands, and his ghost against, Central's team. And that was it for him. Like, he felt like he had made it when he was playing that game. And that are some of his most meaningful memories about Hinchliffe. He never told me that that's where his tryout was, but he told me that he played football there on Thanksgiving against Central High School, and how proud he was to, play for East Side and try to beat Central every Thanksgiving.
So every year that your dad was a student at East Side High School, they won. They beat Central.
Okay.
Prior to being there, Central was winning. So it goes to show you what he had meant to not only that specific game, but to the East Side Ghosts.
Yeah, and the city of Paterson, what it meant. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was huge.
And,
yeah.
I think in one game, I done some research about one of the Thanksgiving Day games. He scored a touchdown, threw a pass that led for a touchdown, and kicked an extra point. I mean, back then, everybody played every position.
Yeah.
There weren't really any specialists. So.
Yep.
So I'm going to just do a very quick public service announcement for the library. And then we'll go back to HP. And then I'm going to try a dangerous experiment where I'm going to unmute everybody, and we'll see if anybody has any more questions. So here it is. Union Public Library has lots of programs that are really interesting. Last week we did one on Sinatra. We've done them on Jeopardy. The American Jazz Museum, we're doing a program with them. We're doing a program with the Ellis Island Foundation. The way to find out about these programs is to like/follow us on Facebook. I've emailed everybody and write back to me that you want to be on the newsletter, or check our website at www.uplnj.org. And I'm also going to thank Bruce for moderating, Larry and Brian for being who they are. They've both dedicated themselves so much, and they've spent so much time on it. And I really appreciate you giving us time today. So before you respond, I'm going to let Larry Hogan back in.
Okay, I guess I'm speaking, but I don't see anybody, but I think everybody can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, one thing is a kind of a personal advertisement I'm putting in, but before I do that, the first book that was written about Negro League baseball was Only the Ball Was White.
Yeah,
by Bob Paterson, and there have been a host of books written by various authors since then, but that's still such a good starting place. The book still holds up after all these years. I managed to write one recently called The Forgotten History of Negro League Baseball, of African American baseball, excuse me, because the story goes back all the way to the 1880s, when much before there were any Negro leagues. And in that book, there's a nice section that I wrote about Larry Doby. It was easy to write about. The other thing, which I didn't use the term, but I do all the time in the presentations that I make, gentlemen. These folks were really gentlemen. They held themselves in a dignified way. And that's a piece of what made it so interesting for me as I got into the story and started to know them. I didn't meet anyone who wasn't a gentleman. So those two books, Bob Peterson's Only the Ball Was White, and then my book recently, The Forgotten History of American Baseball, if I can put in a little personal plug there.
Absolutely. You got to get something from this. So absolutely.
Oh, well,
Okay.
I'm getting something both from Brian and from Larry on this one.
Great. So I am now going to unmute all, and I want the hosts, Larry and Bruce and Brian, to unmute themselves right away. So I'm going to unmute everybody. And that way, does anyone have a question that they would like to ask at this time? Everybody having the chance to ask Wanda, and then Richard. So Wanda, can you unmute yourself, please? Great. Wanda, can you unmute yourself?
Am I unmuted?
Now you are.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, my husband and I, Stanley, used to have a Negro League store in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And we had the pleasure of meeting Jim Robinson, Jim Scott, and Pedro Sierra. My question is, what do you think after 100 years that the Major League Baseball is finally starting to include Negro Leagues?
Well, I'll tell you what, Wanda, I'm glad you asked that question, because when I heard that Major League Baseball was going to include the statistics from the Negro Leagues, I was bowled over. And not for my father, but for all those men that know that the competition that they played in was worthy of Major League competition, the ones that didn't get the chance.
I was mad. And the reason
Yeah.
I was mad is because Jim died, Bob died within a month.
Yeah, well.
And I knew them very well.
Yeah, that's something that unfortunately.
It's like, why, and like, you have to excuse me because I'm mad. Why now? Is it because what's going on in the country that Major League Baseball, you're trying to do, have a little inkling of forgiveness?
Of course,
I don't think so.
of course.
I don't think so.
No, well, I think that
it's money.
Realize, well, money makes the world go round.
Yeah,
We know that.
We got to be
also
realistic.
think that the climate that we're in, is conducive for them to do something like that. So yeah, definitely money.
It was actually a very long-term project that was worked on.
I know it
by
was. I
dozens
really,
of SABR researchers.
No, I have been active in the Negro League and research for about 25 years. I was a member of SABR. I just got upset with what I saw. And I just had to, sometimes, you just have to step away.
Yeah, well,
but
again,
you still have to educate the young people.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And like I said, I was bowled over that they would do it. That's something I thought they would never do.
True.
You may be right that, it was a long time coming and it took too long. But we're here, you're here, and I'm here to see it. And I'm proud. And I am so happy for those guys that played. Unfortunately, like you said, a lot of them don't know, in this realm. Hopefully somehow in heaven they know, because
I have to show off my shirt.
Yep, very nice.
And one other thing, I was at the ceremony in 2006.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
Nice.
Yes, we
Wanda,
were.
can I just interject something here? Can you hear me, Wanda?
Yes, I can.
Pedro is basically the last one left in the area, and one of the last of the Negroes left.
I know.
There was a wonderful story in the Sunday Star Ledger on Pedro. Just a big front page on the perspective section, beautiful photos. So if anybody wants to learn about Pedro,
I grew up in
Star Ledger on Sunday, the perspective section.
Okay. I grew up in Jersey City.
We miss Jim Robinson so much, and we miss
know.
Bob Scott so much. Of course, we miss a whole lot of the fellas so much, but those two recently passed, as Wanda says.
Yeah.
So Wanda, I was also very conflicted about the announcement saying that the Negro Leagues were now a major league circuit, because I was happy because like Larry, it's about time, way past time. And, but I was angry because they figured out a way to do it that would exclude the 3 women who played in the Negro Leagues because they played after 1948, which is the cutoff date that they decided
And
on.
I met Mamie. I met Mamie.
Oh,
She was a character.
I'm sure. Yeah. So anyway, I was mad about that. And, they gave all kinds of rationales, none of which made me very
Make any
happy or,
sense.
yeah, but, like I
just
said,
had
it
to
was
say
a
my
very,
2 cents.
yeah, mine too. In one
Okay.
sense, I think it was extraordinary and way past time. But on the other hand, there were, I have issues with it. So
There's a wonderful play that has been done on Tony Stone. I forget the
Yes.
title of it, but
I saw it.
it's called
yeah, I
Tony
saw
Stone.
that in New York. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it twice. It was marvelous. Yeah, very marvelous. And there have been a couple of books written about her, but not enough. And especially about Connie Morgan, who's sort of the forgotten one among the 3.
Yeah.
Tony Stone and Mamie Johnson, get a lot of mention. But Connie
Was there
Morgan
one called Peanut?
that was Mamie Johnson, Mamie
Mamie
Peanut
Johnson.
Johnson.
Okay.
She was the one that was in the stands when Monet Davis was pitching in the Little League World Series.
Right.
And they did some very nice face-to-faces with Mamie Peanut Johnson and Monet Davis, who, as we all know, isn't playing baseball anymore. She's playing basketball. And the reason she's not playing baseball is because there were not very many places for her to take her baseball skills once she aged out of Little League. And I've been so interested and fascinated to listen to you, Brian and Larry, and everybody that knows anything about this, because there's so many parallels between the Negro Leagues and what you said about innovation and creativity and how they had to work around and, figure out their own way of doing it, of pursuing their passion. And that's really what women's baseball right now is in the infancy of doing, because there are programs all over the country that haven't really found a way to become unified. But we're getting younger girls to play. And there are places for them to play beyond high school now. A young woman just got a college scholarship a couple of weeks ago to play baseball.
So Perry,
Yes.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but
Sure.
Richard has been so patient.
Sure,
Richard,
yeah, I'll get off my platform. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Richard and Wanda, I hope you feel you're not alone, is the best I can say. So
Yes.
Richard, you're up.
I wasn't being patient. I was very much appreciate the conversation. I think it's a wonderful event. And I just wanted to put in my 2 cents as a former sports editor of the East Side Criterion. And the high point of our sports season was always the East Side Central game at Hinchliffe Stadium, which even in my era, in the mid 1960s, attracted pretty much a full house. And my recollection of the high point of that football game, as much as the game, was seeing Larry Doby enter the stadium and find his seat on the East side. It was our celebrity, and he had a way about him that reflected his stature in the community, his character. He carried himself with remarkable dignity, and he just inspired all of us. The only problem is that I've been a Cleveland Indian fan ever since, and my entire lifetime, we haven't won a World Series. We've come very close.
Yeah.
And it's been a source of frustration, but also a connection to Paterson. So thank you.
Thank you for those kind words.
Richard, I have to tell you, just a personal comment, that I am a major Cubs fan. Let's play to Ernie Banks. And so you will win the series. You will. we never thought it would happen. So it does happen. Marion, you need to unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah, hi there. I'm very interested in Perry Barber's background. She has such interesting insider knowledge.
If you like, we can talk later on.
Okay.
So I don't have to take up any more time. I'll put my email address in. Oh, I can't do that. Just Google me, Perry Barber, and you'll find me all over Twitter.
Perry, you can send, I have your email address, and Marion, I will get it to you. What's your
Thank
last
you.
name, Marion?
I'm sorry, excuse me?
What's Marion's last name?
Konop, K-O-N-O-P.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I know who you are. Okay, great.
Great,
Thank you. Thank you
Does
so much.
Larry or Brian have a wrap-up comment, or do you want me to open this? Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question?
I want to ask one question. This is Elsa.
Hi, Elsa.
Hi. My question is, the Negro League, did they only play in the United States, or did they go out of the country and play some exhibition games in their time?
Yeah.
Like, where did they go?
Didn't they
Well,
go to
I
Japan?
would say individual players did
Played,
play
yeah, all over.
You know, but
Mexico,
I don't know
Cuba,
that they
Puerto
went as a
Rico.
team.
Yeah, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Mexico.
Mexico.
As a whole team?
No,
No, but
individual
individual players, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Monty Irvin played all over.
Yeah.
I'm not
I
sure.
think they would
Larry
they play on
go? I don't
integrated
think Larry went
teams
down
in
in the
those
Caribbean,
settings?
did he?
Puerto Rico, he played.
Okay, yeah.
And was he playing on a team with white players? Was that an integrated team he was playing on when he played in Puerto
Well,
Rico?
they were all Puerto Ricans. I know that.
Okay.
They were Puerto
Okay.
Ricans and Americans. So I'm sure there were some lighter than others, but I don't think there were any white players.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
somebody said in the background, Japan, 1927 and 31 or 32 black teams,
Went.
Right.
all-star teams went to Japan.
Yeah.
Entire teams.
Now, I'm just curious because I know I'm of Puerto Rican descent, and I know that there's a lot of famous Puerto Ricans that play baseball. And as a whole, as a country, that is one of their pastimes.
Right. Right. And I know my father played for the San Juan Senadors, I believe they were called. Him and Mr. Irvin, yeah. And that was, him and my mom were down there, and that was some really happy times. You know, my mom would go to the beach every day. So yeah, they have very good memories about that, obviously.
Thanks, Elsa.
You're welcome.
Do we have another question? Do we have a wrap-up from?
I have a logistical question.
Please.
Can our host have a way of getting out on an email to everyone who's here tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
If you have something that you want me to include in that email, including the names of books that have been written by anybody who happens to be on this call, include that, and I will include that in the email. And Larry and Brian, if you have anything that you want me to include in that email, please let me know as well. Brian, do you want to do a quick commercial for either fundraising for Hinchliffe or anything?
Well, we've never really been a fundraising organization. It's been mainly more advocacy and grant writing. It was always difficult to try to raise money for a building that was pretty much abandoned by the Paterson Public Schools. And if you know anything about Paterson, there's a lot of like hesitation to donate to things that, because you don't know where the money's going to go to. So, and we're about to start construction in April. So that's a good thing.
That's wonderful.
But we do have a revamped website. It's hinchlifstadium.com. Very simple. No extra C there, okay, Bruce? It's hinchlifstadium.com. We partnered with Ballpark Brothers to redevelop our website. Started doing that in November. Some things that you might find interesting is we're working on something called This Date in History. It's not always going to be specific to Hinchliffe, but it will tie back to Hinchliffe in some way, shape, or form. So we have something from November all the way to May right now. We're working on the rest of the months now. So you'll have something for the next few days if you want to see what happened on this date. Right now it's February, so you're going to see a lot of information on the Negro League's meetings, maybe Larry Doby signing his yearly contract, which I do have a very funny story I'd like to share about that.
Please.
Larry, I read something about your dad, and apparently he was traded from the Chicago White Sox to the Baltimore Orioles.
Mhm.
Never played for the Orioles,
No.
but he is pictured in uniform. He didn't make it to spring training, ended up getting traded back to Cleveland, right? So the White
Yep.
Sox trade him. Turns out, while your family was living in Paterson at the time, turns out your sister Christina found out about the trade. She was 8 years old, and apparently she read it in the paper and showed it to your father. No one ever informed your dad. The White Sox didn't
Right.
call him to tell him. The Orioles never called
Right.
him. Your sister told him you got traded to Baltimore. I
That's
thought that
funny.
was a funny story.
Yeah, definitely.
If I find the article, I'll send it to you.
Okay, cool.
Larry, do you have any wrap-up comments that you'd like to make?
No, I just want to thank you for, organizing this, and it was a pleasure and meeting you and the LSU gentleman, and of course, Brian. So I'm just very happy to participate, and, I think it's a good thing, whenever you can learn something, it's always a good thing.
Well, you taught us a lot here today, as did Brian, as did the participants. So I'm going to end the meeting. I hope that you all will come on to other meetings that we have coming up. We have really great programs, so please, and because I sent it to you about 14 times already, how to sign up. And those who have come to these programs before know that I'm a real nag. So thank you all, and I hope everybody has a great evening. Thank you to everybody.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well done.
Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
You too. Thanks, Larry. Bye,
Okay.
Brian.
Bye-bye.
Larry, you okay? Brian, you
Yep.
okay?
Yep. Take care.
Okay, everybody good? And we're off.
Good. Bye-bye.